Okay, welcome back. So now we continue with the Samurai trilogy with the film Samurai 2 Duel at the Ichijoji Temple. The sequel continues the story where the first film left off, except that a few years pass in the meantime. The film starts with Miyamoto on his journey to become a true samurai, having a duel with a man using chain and sickle. It's a pretty cool scene. It's dark, there's tall grass waving in the wind. It's filmed really well, and it's a joy to get lost in the suspense. Now, of course, Miyamoto wins the fight, but the old priest that he's learning from is not impressed. While Miyamoto has mastered the art of the sword by now, he still hasn't learned to act psychologically as a true samurai. He still is very arrogant and gets riled up very quickly. Also, an orphan kid joins Miyamoto and becomes his pupil. Honestly, he isn't that much. He doesn't have that much of an important role here, but he is an interesting character nonetheless. The main plotline is that Miyamoto challenged the Yoshika school. He basically beats their disciples one by one until he says it's enough and he wishes to challenge the master of Yoshida school himself. But Yoshida's pupils betray him and attempt to assassinate Musashi, knowing very well that their master is no match for him. One of the key scenes in this film is where Musashi goes to the sword polisher. The polisher, at first, he refuses him. He says that he is polishing the souls of the samurai and not murderers' weapons. At first, Musashi acts like the old Takezo would. He gets pissed off and he lives, offended that he was refused. But as he's walking outside, he just sort of realizes his arrogance. He realizes how unnecessary his anger is. He gains some consciousness about himself, and he returns back to the polisher, changes his act completely. This time, he humbly asks him, in a very polite Japanese manner, to polish his sword. Now, the man is very embarrassed, he apologizes, and he admits that in the truth, he really can't polish the sword because it's just too good for him. This is an important step in Miyamoto's character development because he learns, that you can solve problems with other ways than just pure force. Otsu is still hoping to see Musashi. She happens to meet him by accident at one point, and that happens to reignite her desire for him. But his love for the sword is now much greater than the love for her. I feel that here the love portion of the film is somehow where it gets most lost to the modern audiences, because it's basically the theme here. Even though it's love, it shouldn't be taken as literally. It's more about the conflict between duty and love. The girl Akemi and the woman from the lone house from the previous film are still present here. Now, the woman actually married, like the mother, the old mother, she married Matahachi now. But it's not a very happy marriage indeed, it's a pretty horrible marriage. She tries to sell her daughter to some rich guy for money. It's a surprisingly disturbing scene where she leaves her own daughter with the guy to use her, despite her obviously being against it and obviously having no interest for the guy whatsoever. And it's a really sad depiction of a hard reality of a woman's role in that harsh Asian society. Kami actually finds that Miyamoto is still alive, and she even meets Otsu and gets to know her. This is where sort of a love triangle starts to form. Also, a new character is introduced, Sasaki Kojiro. I really like this guy and his place in this trilogy. His introduction is really great as well. It's not that we are introduced to him immediately, but the sword polisher, he is only mentioned to him because the cool sword that's laying there happens to belong to him, so it's a very slow introduction. The build up to him is very slow. Later he's just introduced as a just and ambitious guy, and he even helps Miyamoto when he considers Yoshida school to be unfair. The final battle sequence is pretty epic. It actually features Musashi fighting 80 men from Yoshida school. Now, the concept of one guy fighting 80 men is very over the top, very impossible in real life. Like, in actual sword fighting, like, one person fighting two persons is, in truth, pretty insane. It's really hard to pull it off. But here it's done very well, because at first, Musashi is being warned about the ambush, so he gets his time to prepare, because Sasaki Kojiro tells him about it. But he also has time to utilize the rice paddy terrain, the terrain that's there to his advantage. Now, because on the moat inside the rice paddy there is only enough space for one man, he basically gets to take advantage of that embankment to reduce their number advantage, since he can only be directly fighting one of them on the embankment. So it is an enjoyable fight to watch. It's pretty surprising that it's possible to film such a battle and have it not be completely unrealistic. Matahachi from the previous film is, as I said before, still present here. He actually happens to find a dead man with a diploma from the Yoshida school, and he pretty much just pretends that it's his and that he's a great samurai. Like, he even comes home and he tells his mother, like, look, I got this diploma, I became a great samurai at the Yoshida school, and so on and so on. He just lies about it. There's actually a very funny, like, his final scene is quite funny, where Matahachi actually happens to confront Sasaki Kojiro. He brags to Sasaki how he has this diploma and he's the master of the Yoshida school and how he better go away from him. But it just so happens that the real owner of the diploma is actually Sasaki Kojiro. So Matahachi's story arc ends in quite a tragic way, and when I think about it, it's sort of a complete opposite to how Musashi's story arc goes. It really contrasts well with the progress that Musashi makes, because Musashi, he follows sword instead of love. Like, he chooses duty. He basically follows his goals instead of just going the path of least resistance. And on the other side, Matahachi basically just does the easiest way possible. When that woman tries to settle up with him, he accepts it immediately, like it's the easiest thing he can do. He doesn't stand up to her. He doesn't have any concrete goals of his own. Because I really think this dilemma here, that's the theme of this film, having to choose between the love and the sword, it really shouldn't be understood too literally, but more as a symbol for either following your life's goals or instead of just taking instant gratification and just taking whatever the path of least resistance is. It doesn't really need to be, like love like it's presented here. Maybe something else, I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit lost here because of cultural difference or whatever, but I think it's very well done anyway. The final confrontation features Miyamoto fighting the master of the Yoshida school. It's a short confrontation. Musashi wins very quickly, but he hesitates to kill his opponent. We see a vision in his head of the old monk telling him that he is too strong. The main point of this film was that Musashi was already a great fighter, an excellent fighter to be fair, but he still needs to learn other skills to become a true samurai. Like, he needs to become more cultured, more calm. He needs to learn to become a little bit more detached from this world, which it goes a little bit into Musashi's philosophy, and it sort of connects here with Musashi's original, like, the historical writings of the real person. It's sort of being included in this film. It does a pretty good job. He becomes a little bit more detached from this world, he sees that he doesn't, and this means that he doesn't need to be afraid, or he doesn't need to be a, killer. It happens very slowly through the film, but in this final scene, he really does truly embody it. Now the film ends with Sasaki Kojiro looking at Miyamoto from afar, and in his mind he's expressing the wish to fight him, but that will happen next time. Ultimately, the film is a joy to watch. The scenery is, again, very beautiful. The scenes shot in real locations are a sight to see, but there's also quite a lot of studio scenes being utilized here, but they're done very well. Like, wind and lighting effects are being used very skillfully to create a cool atmosphere. It's definitely much different compared to the first film. It honestly is a completely different film, but that's actually really great, because just as how Musashi has completely changed has completely changed from the previous film to this film, the same way the film has changed. So it's a pretty cool thing. The characters as well are pretty fun, are pretty cool. So the longer the film goes on, the more invested we become. They are quite interesting, but that's as far as it. So we will see what happens in the final film.